Hello, and welcome to our next series of Coinscrum Tech Talks. I'm Nick Gregory from CommerceBlock. Today we have John Newbery, profound, well-known Bitcoin core dev. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's good to be here.
Great. So maybe tell us about your journey into Bitcoin, how you learned Bitcoin, got into it, became an Englishman in New York, and it'd be interesting to know how that all happened.
Well, I really first got interested in Bitcoin in 2015. I was living in Australia at the time and found Bitcoin. I heard about it on a podcast. Had heard about Bitcoin, several times before, like everyone else. And I think most people, it takes 2 or 3 exposures before you actually start taking it seriously. And I started looking into it and just got completely obsessed and couldn't do anything else. And decided it was time to quit my job and work full time on Bitcoin, which I did. I quit my job, and my plan was to find some way to work full time on Bitcoin. And fortunately for me, at exactly that time, Chaincode announced their first residency in New York, which I applied for and was accepted to. And so I moved to New York, or I flew to New York for a month in September 2016, and then they offered me a full-time position, and I ended up staying there for 4 years.
Cool. So I guess Bitcoin's kind of changed since you got in. I think I met you in 2016, where a meetup probably had 5 to 10 people and their dog, to now being $1 trillion network where people take it seriously. How's that changed things for you as a Bitcoin core dev?
Not so much. I mean, it's a bit more distracting.
Yeah.
I guess a common view is that protocol developers like bear markets because you get to focus on the technology and there's less distraction happening. But it's good. I mean, it's if we want Bitcoin to succeed, it has to do this. It has to become more valuable and grow and expand and bring more people on. But in terms of the actual work, maybe there's more pressure, right? There's $1 trillion riding on this thing now rather than 100 billion or 10 billion or whatever. But no, in terms of day-to-day work, it doesn't make much difference.
So I guess this year, a lot of the noise from Bitcoin is probably Taproot.
Right.
Could you, how would you describe Taproot to the layman, or how is it going to change people? How is it going to change for people who use Bitcoin? What does this mean?
There are really 4 benefits, I would say, to Taproot. So Taproot is an upgrade to the scripting language of Bitcoin. So whenever you spend Bitcoin, you send that output to a script. You encumber that output with a script, the spending conditions. And Taproot makes that scripting more powerful, essentially. Schnorr, the combination of Schnorr and Taproot. And the benefits there are it becomes more scalable because you can do more in less space and less computing. It becomes more fungible because outputs end up looking the same. You get a bit of a privacy benefit because outputs look the same, and also because when you spend a Schnorr Taproot output, you're revealing less on the blockchain. And there's more features, you can add more features and more functionality on top of these constructs. So things like Lightning become more powerful, CoinJoin, building any kind of contract on top of Bitcoin potentially becomes more powerful. So in sum, it's good all around. There's not really a downside to it.
I mean, do you see what kind of applications do you see being built on Bitcoin that we don't see right now because of Taproot?
I think it makes things like multi-sig easier and more attractive, more economically attractive. So, I mean, that's good for security, right? Because if everyone's using multi-sig in a safe way, then that arguably your coins are safer. And currently with multi-sig, when you send a coin to a multi-sig output, you place all of those public keys in the output. So the output becomes quite large. If you're doing a 2 or 3 multi-sig, there are 3 public keys in that output. And then in the spend of that output, there are 2 signatures, again, quite large. And because of the way the fees work in Bitcoin, the larger the output or the larger the input, in general, the larger the transaction, the higher the fees. So currently there's a trade-off. If you want to use multi-sig and be more secure, it will cost you more. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Schnorr Taproot, there are constructions where a multi-sig would just be one public key and one signature. And so sending to a multi-sig is exactly the same cost as sending to a single public key. And spending, again, is exactly the same cost. So you don't have that trade-off. You get the low fees to sending to a single key, but you get the security of a multi-sig. So that's just one example of how that might actually benefit the end user.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's been some debate on the mailing lists about how to activate Taproot. Could you give us an oversight of what the debate is, why there is a debate? I mean, it seems from what you're saying that there's no reason not to have Taproot. It's not like the SegWit battles of 2017. So what's your take on this?
Well, the reason people are, I guess, a little bit wary or careful about this is exactly that, because of 2017, when there was quite a battle over activating a soft fork. Mm-hmm. So Schnorr Taproot is a change to the consensus. It's changing the fundamental rules of Bitcoin. And the philosophy of Bitcoin is conservatism, that your definition of Bitcoin does not change, or the definition of Bitcoin does not change. And so there's a bit of a conflict there, right? We want Bitcoin to be stable. And if you bought Bitcoin in 2015, then it's the same as Bitcoin in 2021. Mm-hmm. The rules of the game shouldn't change. But a soft fork is, in some senses, changing the rules of the game a little bit. In this case, we think it's beneficial for everyone. And there haven't been, as far as I know, any kind of technical objections to the change itself. The question is all about how you activate that change, how you make that change, and how you coordinate across a decentralized network to make that change. So 2017 was SegWit. That was a change that I think the vast majority of Bitcoin users wanted. There was I'd say a sizable minority that didn't want SegWit, and they ended up hard forking off and creating their own alternative to Bitcoin. And there was a lot of drama around that. I don't think that will happen around Schnorr Taproot, because there's not really any real objection, and the benefits are so obvious. The only question is how do we do it, and how do we do it safely?
Could one of the challenges of activating the soft fork is simply just the size of Bitcoin, that maybe there are no people that are blocking it? It's just very hard to get 95% of the miners agreeing, because it's such a big network. Maybe some of them are not that contactable or aware. Could that be an issue, that maybe Bitcoin's becoming so big it has to be ossified because of the complexity of changing something so big now? Is that so? It's not a political debate. It's just a size debate of how big.
I think. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt either, but yeah, I'm vocally agreeing with you. I think as Bitcoin becomes bigger, and there are more players, and it becomes more decentralized, we hope, both in terms of the concentration of hodlers, who's actually holding coins. And we hope mining becomes more decentralized. We hope exchanges become more decentralized. There are more of them. We hope the development becomes more decentralized. You get to a point where it just becomes much more difficult to coordinate. Mm-hmm. And that's what this problem is. It's a coordination problem. How do we get a decentralized network to upgrade on the fly? So that's a good thing. That's Bitcoin behaving in the way it should. We want it to be decentralized. We don't want it to be politically influenceable. So yeah, maybe at some point Bitcoin will become ossified and it will be impossible to change the protocol. I hope we're not there yet, because I think there are really cool things we can do with this change, and I think it would be a shame if we didn't get this change in. But I can see a point in the future where, if Bitcoin's $100 trillion network and all of the major companies are holding it on their balance sheet and sovereign nations are holding it in their sovereign funds, then it becomes really difficult to coordinate a change.
So if in a year's time we haven't upgraded, you wouldn't be in favor of, say, reducing the 95% threshold to, say, 85%, or doing a UASF?
Yeah, sorry, there was a point I wanted to pick you up on there. It's very important to remember that the miners don't make the rules of Bitcoin. And so this debate is not, can we convince 95% of miners? I think it's a bit more philosophical than that. It's, well, if we, to the best of our knowledge, believe that essentially everyone wants this change, can we just set a flag day at some point in the future where we say, okay, on the 1st of January 2022, or whatever date, the upgrade happens, no matter what the miners are signaling. That's the question. I think people are generally in favor of reducing that 95% threshold to 90%. But again, it's not a vote. It's not like we're polling miners or through the mining process saying, okay, if 95% of people vote for this, then we can go ahead. That signaling is really just signaling that those miners are ready for the change. We shouldn't be putting a proposal forward if we don't already believe that essentially everyone is on board with it. So,
trying to interpret what you're saying that a USAF may be a good thing if the miners want it, and we're just struggling a couple of percent here or something. Is that
a UASF may be a good thing, but I would erase that line if the miners want it.
Again, if the miners have consensus with the economic users and the community.
Yeah, I mean, if the economic players, if the holders, if the users of Bitcoin want it, and for whatever reason, the miners have not signaled by some point, maybe it does make sense, but that is quite a dangerous thing to do, because it can lead to a chain split. If some users are enforcing new rules and others aren't, then you could get a consensus, a chain split, which is not good for anyone.
I guess a lot of this is going to set precedents for future changes. And I guess doesn't seem likely we're going to get a block size increase, or is that fair to say? Or you're still hopeful we've got a progress here?
I don't know. I have no idea. No, I don't think anyone knows. Currently, I don't think we need one. Right now, fees are moderately high, I guess. But there's still a lot of room for using the blockchain more efficiently. And I think that's what we want the incentives to be, that users of the blockchain are incentivized to be parsimonious with their use of that space. And the fee market is a pretty visible hand pushing them in that direction, right? If you simply expand the block space, then there's really no incentive to be efficient. And you make another lane on the highway and it fills up, and you just need to build another lane in a few years' time. So
we're seeing that with other blockchains, maybe.
We might be, yeah. So I don't know, maybe at some point in the future where we've kind of completely wrung out all of the efficiency gains to be had on the blockchain, and we're nowhere near that. Maybe it is time to expand, make bigger blocks, but we're not there.
So leading on to what your new venture is, maybe you could give us a bit of an overview of how Bitcoin core funding has happened and how it's maybe different than many other open source projects that we know, like Linux, etc.
Yeah. Well, Bitcoin Core is, I think, unique, or at the very least extreme, in terms of its decentralization. So there are many very successful open source projects. Linux is the obvious one, but many others where development is directed by a centralized body of some kind. Now, that might be a foundation like the Linux Foundation. There might be open source projects that are directed by private companies, like Google or Apple might have open source projects that they direct, but they release the source code to the world. Bitcoin Core is decentralized. There's no foundation. People tried to make a foundation back in 2012, 13. That didn't go so well. But the whole point of Bitcoin is it's decentralized. There are no kings. There's no manager. There's no one directing what Bitcoin is. And so Bitcoin protocol development and Bitcoin core development happen in this decentralized manner. And funding comes from various sources, and that's changed over the years. So like I mentioned, there was a Bitcoin Foundation that funded 2 or 3 developers for, I guess, a couple of years before it imploded. Those developers went on to be funded by MIT DCI, so a group within MIT. Other organizations who have funded Bitcoin protocol development are Blockstream. That's obviously a private company. They've had, over the years, quite a few Bitcoin core developers. Chaincode is a private foundation, non-commercial organization that I worked for several years. They employ several engineers working on Bitcoin. Square Crypto got in the game last year or a couple of years ago, and they now employ, I guess, 4 or 5 engineers and give grants to many, many more. Several exchanges have been funding developers through grants, OKCoin, Kraken, Xapo, Coinbase. So that's really, I guess, that is the state of funding up until last year. And I'd say we're in a better place than we've ever been. There's more diverse sources of funding, which is exactly what we want for a decentralized project. So I worked for Chaincode for 4 years, and then I returned to the UK last year. And Chaincode is based entirely in New York, so it was time for me to move on from Chaincode. And I decided, well, I wanted to continue contributing to Bitcoin. And I saw there's a bit of a gap in that funding world where a lot of people wanted to contribute to Bitcoin core development or Bitcoin protocol development, and they didn't really know how. There wasn't an easy way for people just to write a check or contribute $100 or $10 a month or whatever. And so that was one of the ideas that led to Brink, which is a new organization I set up. The other one was a very strong focus on mentoring and onboarding new contributors, which is something that I've been doing at Chaincode, and definitely wants to continue and scale up. Mm-hmm. So Brink is a 501c3 organization in the US, and that's a charitable nonprofit organization with all of the kind of federal tax benefits that come with that, being that people can donate to Brink and write off that donation as a tax deduction. So that's really important and very beneficial for us, and means that people, for example, holders who have bought Bitcoin in 2012 and sell in 2020 and have a big capital gains tax bill can offset that by donating to an organization that is funding Bitcoin development. And the organization exists to support Bitcoin developers. So the 2 programs that we run are, one, a grants program where we give grants to developers anywhere in the world based on our knowledge of their potential and history and track record and contributions that they will make. And the other program is what we're calling the fellowship, which is a 1-year program for onboarding new contributors. We have our first fellow. Her name's Gloria. She started about 6 weeks ago. She's fantastic. She's taking to it really well, as I knew she would, because I've been working with her for about a year now. And so the idea is that she will work with us for a year, and at the end of that time, she will have a reputation in the Bitcoin protocol development space. She'll be in a really good place to get a grant or get employment to work on Bitcoin Core. And then our grant program, we have our next board meeting next week, and we'll be awarding our first grants, hopefully announcing those in March. So, to summarize all of that, it's our mission is to support Bitcoin protocol developers, and we have those 2 programs, and we are, I guess, unique in our funding that we are funded entirely by donations from members of the public and from Bitcoin businesses and organizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that. Was it Jack Dorsey funded you yesterday? Or I saw something on Twitter about that. Is that so he's already funding Square, and he also basically made a donation to
yeah, Jack is doing a lot. He obviously Square Crypto is huge. I think they have 5 or 6 employees in-house, plus I think about 20 grants at this point. So they are by far the largest funders of developers and designers in open source Bitcoin. And then Jack personally, he's given 1 Bitcoin to us, so that's a really nice donation. He's supported Coin Center, which is an advocacy and policy group in Washington, making sure that the US government doesn't do stupid things with regulation and laws around Bitcoin. So he supported them. I know he's supporting another program in Africa for developers in Africa potentially. So yeah, he's done a lot. He sent us some Bitcoin. We're very grateful to him, and yeah, we'd encourage other people to be like Jack.
So if a mining company in the UK or somewhere in Europe wanted to improve or sponsor the improvement of the Stratum or something, or better hash or something like that, is that something where they could contact Brink to basically make a grant for that? Or
absolutely. Yeah, we haven't offered that kind of model where grants go to a specific project yet, but we would be open to that. Okay. The model we have right now is that funds come in and they go directly to our programs. So I should say all of our overheads are covered by our founding sponsors. So any additional donations that we receive from this point on go 100% to grants and fellowships. I think that's, people like to hear that. But if a miner came to us and said, we have this specific project and we want to fund it, then we absolutely would be interested in making that happen. One thing that we can't do is if someone comes to us and says, I want to fund that developer over there, can you pass through, if we give you 100,000, can you just give it to them? We're not allowed to do that. And you can't
guarantee any changes to the Bitcoin consensus as well.
Yeah, obviously we can't do that. We have no power to guarantee any changes will happen. And we wouldn't want to advocate for changes to the consensus, obviously. So in principle, yes, if there was a specific project where we could run like an open grant proposal process where people would apply to work on this project, the other kind where you just use Brink as a pass-through to give money to someone that you like, we can't do that because charities aren't.
But you'd be open to certain vectors in crypto and in Bitcoin.
Absolutely, in Bitcoin, and related technology. So if it was Lightning or mining or applications on top of Bitcoin, or even things like Tor or like kind of adjacent technologies that were helping Bitcoin, it would be interested in talking about those things.
So are you still going to make Bitcoin contributions? How's that? Am I going from being a Bitcoin core dev to maybe a manager? Is that?
Good. I mean, right now, like I'm in this room most of the time, so I don't have much. I don't have much else to do. But yes, I spend quite a lot of my time now on admin and operations and that kind of thing. I've got a really good team with me on Brink. So Mike Schmidt founded it with me. He was with me at Optech. He's fantastic. And then we have hired a director of operations who we're going to announce next week. She's fantastic and really helps and knows all the things about nonprofits that we don't know and is able to do all of that stuff for us. So
you're predominantly based in London, essentially.
I'm in London. Mike is in Texas. Our director of operations is also in the US. So that's where most of the organizational stuff happens because it's a 501c3 organization. It's incorporated in the US. I'm in London. The office will be here once things are open, and Gloria will move over here, and the other fellows will move over here because that's the best way to learn, being right next to someone that you're working with. And the whole point of the fellowship is to kind of supercharge the learning of these fellows. So over a year, they're ready and have taken on as much as possible. So we're in London. I spend quite a lot of my time, talking to lawyers and doing paperwork and setting up a company, or all those things that.
And opening bank accounts, I presume that's a challenge.
Oh, don't get me started on bank accounts. Yeah, but it's very important to me, personally, and I think to the organization that I am deeply involved in the technical part of Bitcoin, and also deeply involved in the learning and mentoring of the fellows. That's kind of the whole point of that half of the organization. So I spend a lot of my time on that. We have a board. We have a board of 5 people, and they, including myself, we approve all of the grants. So when the applications come in, we go through those and assess the grantees. And they're really technical. They're really involved in the Bitcoin world, and that's important because when people give us money, they want to know that it's being used effectively and being used on the things that are important in Bitcoin. So the fact that we have like Dave Harding on the board, Carla Kirk-Cohen, myself, Mike Schmidt, and then Jerry Brito, who's the director of Coin Center, people who give us money can be confident that those people will not be wasting that money. They'll be picking like the most impactful projects and the most impactful developers to work on those problems. So I think all of those things are important. That's a long answer to your question.
Great. So that's great. So what's the best way to contact you? And I guess more importantly, provide funds for Brink?
Our website is brink.dev. So if you want to donate, you can go to brink.dev, click on donate, and then we accept fiat. We will happily take your dirty fiat off you. We also accept Bitcoin and Lightning payments, and we accept one-off payments and monthly recurring payments. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Twitter, Bitcoin Brink. You can find me on Twitter. I'm JF Newbery, and that's Newbery. I think probably those are the best ways.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. It's great to have insight what's happening in Bitcoin Core, and good luck with Brink. We'll be there on the way on the journey. So thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks all for listening. Bye.